North American driver 3, I will say this is North America. Regulation, you might be surprised that that's third, but we are easily 5 years behind, definitely Europe, but South America, East Asia, far more aggressive policies and regulations on ESG topics. The things that have moved the most recently for the USA are only proposed rules. People expect that the U.S. federal supplier climate risks and resilience rule that came out from the White House during COP27. We expect that to pass at the end of the month in February, and that's just for suppliers of the federal government. And then the SEC ruling has been delayed in court, which pretty much everyone expected, and it will still likely be approved in about a year after those legal dealings proceed. But again, those are very climate related and not ESG, broad environmental, social, and governance. And so we're just not as aggressive as some of those other places. But if you are in the supply chain or you do business in Europe, South America, East Asia, you are also impacted by international regulations. Here's a quick breakdown. I'm not going to spend a ton of time today, but there's a breakdown of the federal supplier rule is really targeting some of those the largest contractors, and there's different levels and tiers that you can be in, and as well as this SEC ruling, there was a delay, so it's quite a bit of a lead-in to prepare for those things. As aggressive as everyone maybe talks about it, it's quite a bit of time to prepare, especially with the delay in the legal proceedings for the SEC ruling. So now let's talk about this 5-step ESG cycle that every organization really needs to go through. And every time you cycle through these 5 steps, you get more mature as an organization in every step. And if you skip any of these steps, it's not the end of the world, but it does elevate the risk. And it does, I would say, impact the quality of your program. So let's just talk about them in brief. And it's awareness that you really need to understand a lot. So your ESG is a big environmental, social, and governance. Sustainability issues are broad, and no one knows everything about all of them. So it's really, what are your most important trends, issues, strategies that you can look at your peers. And then once you look at that, you're going to prioritize. You're never going to have perfect information, but you do have to identify who you're trying to make happy, who are your stakeholders, what's material to them, and then what are your risks versus your opportunities. And then you strategize. You actually create a strategy that takes all of that into consideration. It has vision, KPIs, goals, and plans, and then you execute. You have to have key initiatives, projects, and manage those over time to see performance improve. And then how are you going to report that and tell your story? It's communication, disclosure, not only of performance, but also how you're managing it. People often want to know your management approach to all of those things. And these are color-coded because the first 3 steps in that cycle are really an internal opportunity for leadership to review everything, to have difficult conversations before sharing externally. The execution phase is really mostly internal stakeholders and close business partners. They're going to see you doing things differently and be impacted, but you're not telling the world yet. But in the reporting phase, you're possibly putting out an annual report. Maybe it's just direct disclosure to specific stakeholders or certification bodies, whatever it happens to be, but you are intentionally creating communications out to the larger world. And then it starts all over again, and you revisit each of those steps and continue executing and reporting. So it's important to know that there's role-based leadership that exists at each step, and your training should target those appropriate roles. So let's talk about that. There's a strategist role. Usually those first 3 steps are done by higher level leaders, and they're developing strategy for the overall company. What are our most important environmental, social, and governance issues, and create strategy around that. So as a strategist, you have board of directors, you have chief executives, you have senior VPs and directors. Often if there's a dedicated director of ESG and sustainability, that position is growing more and more popular. They are on that senior ESG and sustainability committee. And often you'll have legal counsel because a lot of these are risk issues and compliance issues first, even before they become feel-good issues. So that's important. In the execution phase, you're really talking about the implementers. It can vary, but they're middle level, lower level. They're in a department sometimes. They're working on a specific issue or initiative. There's project managers, operations managers. There's often a lot of cross-functional subject matter experts who are brought in to really solve complex problems. And there's often risk and quality managers involved as well. And that's the day-to-day doing and improving what is the company's performance. And then you're a reporter, possibly. You're a communications department person. You're in marketing. You might be in investor relations, a very specific type of reporter, government affairs, or even legal compliance. And all of those people craft carefully accurate and well thought out communications to the different stakeholders that want to know how you're performing. So if you can put yourself in one of those categories, it's very important because that helps determine what kind of training. So let's talk about training. If you know where you're at in the company and what your role is, it is critical that ESG or sustainability training fits the role that is being trained. You shouldn't try to give everybody the same kind of training. There can be some very early, like broad training, but you need to give individual roles very specific, detailed, role-specific training for their job. Otherwise, you're wasting time and money and resources for the organization. So first thing, if you look at the strategist role, and all three steps are really the strategist, the same group, the same senior level ESG committee or whatever you want to call it. That's typically what it's called. There might be a working group or something like that, council, but they're really going to focus on three things that are most important, most common. It's what is ESG training around ESG stakeholder engagement, not only what that term means, but the standards involved, how to do it effectively, how to reduce risk but capture opportunity, ESG frameworks and standards that exist, not only just the ones you've heard of, but ones that might apply to you that you've not heard of. And then ESG ratings, not only for yourself if you're publicly traded, you understand which ones could apply to you even if you're not publicly traded, or they apply to some of your other stakeholders and they want you to be involved in those kind of ratings, even if you don't have to by law. And so that's the kind of training that you would be looking at as a strategist from someone like a senior ESG committee. So next is if you're in execution, and even if you're not in execution, if you know people on your team, it's really good to take this information back to them because they're looking at things like just project management skills 101. That may not sound like ESG and sustainability training, but I just implore everyone to say you should have a skilled project manager on your team, especially if it's ESG, you think it's a material issue for your company. It's not just a marketing promotional thing. You should have talented project managers on every initiative. Management standards, these are more in the weeds standards on specific issues, which we'll talk about some examples, but then also target standards. These are, if you're going to actually set goals, it's good to know that there are actually standards out there for how you set goals and that those goals are sort of internationally recognized and you're not basically greenwashing and setting goals that are not really that relevant or that are not industry standard, and that you're going to kind of put yourself in a very weird position to try to explain why are you doing it that way when the entire world has already kind of got on board and is doing it a different way. And then last, the fifth step is the reporting. So if you're a reporter, again, this could be communications, marketing, investor relations, government relations, or legal compliance, you're really going to talk about three things: greenwashing risks, how to avoid them, what are the reporting standards specifically for creating reports, and then assurance, because assurance is becoming more and more a differentiator, not only expected by stakeholders, but it's just an incredible confidence builder for your internal team to know that you are doing things up to standard, and you've received assurance from a third party, which, you know, we say that we are an assurance provider, but we honestly believe that strongly, and you'll find that if you talk to your stakeholders, it's becoming just a growing concern, definitely of the investor community.